Hello, history lovers! Welcome back to my Six Wives of Henry VIII series, and today we're going to be talking about wife number 5, Katherine Howard. Now, before I get any further in this video, I have to give a warning, because I will be talking about sexual abuse. There's no way to tell Katherine's story without talking about that. And I debated with myself before making this video about how much should I go into. And I decided I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I'm not going to make out like what happened wasn't as bad as what happened. Because I feel like that would be an injustice to both Katherine Howard and to the women alive today who are suffering through the same kind of thing that she suffered through. And there's two sayings actually. One is that if history makes you feel all warm and fuzzy, you're not learning history. And the other is those that don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And yes, Katherine Howard has been gone for almost 500 years. But this kind of thing still happens today. And that's even alluded to in the musical Six, where she tells her story.
It turns out some guys just employ women to get them into their private chambers. It was a different time back then.
So like I said, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. We will be talking about some truly nauseating things that happened to her here. And I myself knew very little about this until recently. Being a fan of musical theater, being a fan of history, obviously I checked out the musical Six. Which, by the way, if you are into musicals, I really recommend this. If you can't get to see it in person, all the songs from it are on YouTube, and that's pretty much the entire story is the individual songs. So if you can look those up, you won't really be missing out anything from the musical. So I really recommend looking those up if you're interested in history. Now, when I was in school, if we talked about Katherine Howard at all we learned was basically the gloss over version of her story, like Horrible Histories does in their song Divorced, Beheaded, and Died.
Katherine Howard was 5, a child of 19, so alive, she flirted with others, no way to behave. The axe sent young Kath to her grave.
Yeah, and for years, I thought that's all there was to her story. She cheated on Henry, got caught, and that was that. And that is not her story. And today she's pretty much just remembered as the second died in Divorced, Beheaded, and Died. And I feel like she definitely deserves to have more of her story told than that. And that's alluded to again in Six the Musical.
I'm done 'cause all this time I've been just one word in a stupid rhyme.
So you've been warned about just how bad this is going to get. Just what kind of topics we're going to be talking about here. Now, I'm going to be relying heavily on the song All You Want to Do from Six the Musical, because that was really how I learned the most about Katherine Howard, and after fact checking I found it is scarily, sadly accurate, and I feel like analyzing that song is the best way I can think of to tell her story. Well, Katherine's dad thought it would be a good idea for his own pocketbook, basically, if Katherine was pretty much raised by her step-grandmother. And while Katherine was there, at the age of 13, possibly even as young as 12, she began to be abused by her music teacher, Henry Mannix.
Your dark, sexy Mannix taught me all about dynamics. She was 23 and I was 13, going on 30.
Yeah, there is no such thing as 13 going on 30. There just isn't. Had this happened today, it would have been statutory. There's no doubt about that. Now, I know women were married at a younger age back then. And I know that we have to view different mindsets through the lens of the time. But that doesn't go for this case. I don't feel like that at all. There is no 13-year-old in the world at any time who has been physically, mentally, and emotionally ready for that kind of thing. They're just not at that age. A 13-year-old is a kid, or at least they have the right to be a kid. And for it to have happened to her that young, that's completely disgusting. And when it comes to this kind of thing, I think instead of saying, well, you know, it was a different time back then, we need to say, no, this is not right in any time. Now, remember, at this point, Catherine was living with her step grandmother, who actually caught Mannix having a feel with Catherine. Now, how did she react? Well, she slapped Catherine and blamed her, saying that she was bringing the disgrace on the family. Yeah, nothing like blaming the victim here. I mean, that adds an extra level of horror to it. Now, it is generally believed that it's certain that Catherine and Mannix had never went all the way. And that was because he at least refused that much, which he was not happy about. And he did try to cause trouble over that for her later. But he did at least say, no, no, there's a limit. This is as far as we're going. Well, her grandmother wasn't exactly a help. Because, well, we can see that already. But not only did she, in effect, blame Catherine for what happened, after Mannix was out of the picture, she got Catherine a job working as an assistant for her secretary. Yeah, that went well.
So he asked me to be his little piece of ass. Sisters. Serious, stern and slow. Gets what he wants and he won't take no. Passion in all that he touches. The sexy secretary to the Dowager Duchess.
This secretary to the Dowager Duchess was Francis Durham, and he would lead to huge problems for Catherine later. She was all of 15 when they knew each other when they first met, and yes, they did actually go all the way.
All you wanna do, baby, is touch me, love me, can't get enough. See, all you wanna do, baby, is please me, squeeze me, birds and the bees me. You can't wait a second more to get my carpet on the floor. Playtime's over. The only thing you wanna do is.
Now, remember that I said Henry Mannix caused trouble for Catherine because she wouldn't with him, that she set limits with him. Well, he went around saying, yeah, I've had her. And by the way, she's sleeping with this Durham guy. Went to the grandmother and step grandmother and said, you might want to look in their bedroom at this certain time. Yeah. Her grandmother's reaction was to tell Catherine that doing this would make her look physically ugly so that no man would want her. Nice, huh? Well, event that kinda was the end for Catherine seeing Durham for now, but he's going to come in a big way later on. Well, About this time, good old Henry got married again. Not to Catherine yet, but to Anne of Cleves. Well, she needed a lady in waiting, and Catherine's family arranged for her to be a lady in waiting to Anne of Cleves, which is the way that she met Henry.
And my dad got me this amazing workplace pin court, and you'll never guess who I met. Tall, large, Henry VIII, Supreme Head of the Church of England.
Yeah, this is a real pattern for Henry VIII. Anne Boleyn had been lady in waiting to Catherine of Aragon, Jane Seymour had been lady in waiting to Anne Boleyn, and now he's going after Anne of Cleves' lady in waiting before they were even officially divorced. Now, once he set his eyes on Catherine, she really had no choice but to say yes. You can't say no to the king, right? Henry was 49 and she was 17 at the time that they married. And I'm sure Catherine was absolutely thrilled about that.
So we got married. With Henry, it isn't easy. His temper's short and his friends are sleazy, except for this one courtier. He's a really nice guy, just so sincere.
That courtier is Thomas Culpeper. Now, Catherine actually met Culpeper while she was still lady in waiting to Anne of Cleves. Culpeper was one of Henry's favorite courtiers, was at court a lot. Catherine would have met him and struck up a relationship with him. Now, there is a debate over the nature of that relationship, at least as to how Catherine saw it. There seems to be no doubt that Culpeper wanted more. Catherine may or may not have seen it as just friendship. In either case, they got to be a little too close.
The royal life isn't what I planned, but Thomas is there to lend a helping hand. So sweet, make sure that I'm okay, and we hang out loads when the king's away.
There's one point I want to make very clear here, and that is Catherine did not see Culpeper alone. She was always chaperoned by Lady Ruckford. And I'm going to have a lot more to say about Lady Ruckford shortly. But there was even one case where Lady Ruckford was about to leave the two of them alone, and Catherine even said, "Hey, get back here, you gotta be a chaperone to us," just so nobody could say anything was inappropriate. However, the problem was Ruckford had arranged secret meetings between the two of them that the king didn't exactly know about. Now here's where things get even worse. Culpeper got sick. And remember, at that time, if you got sick, they didn't have the kind of medicine we have today. There was a good chance you weren't going to make it. Well, when Catherine heard that Culpeper was sick, she wrote him a letter that basically said, "I hope you get better soon. I hope you're okay. I hope to see you again." And the letter even says, "Lady Ruckford's available at this time. I hope we can get together again then if you're feeling better." Specifically said when Lady Ruckford was available. Now, the big problem with this letter is that Catherine signed it, "Yours as long as life endures." Potentially meaning more than friendship, but keep in mind this is Tudor times. People signed letters that way back then. It could be taken as something more, or it could have just been innocent friendship. You gotta take that with a grain of salt, knowing how people signed letters back then. But that letter came back to be a big problem for Catherine. Now, she's got even more problems. Remember Francis Durham, the secretary to the Dowager Duchess? Yeah, he's found out, well, obviously he's found out that Catherine is now queen. And he goes to her and says, "Hey, remember how much we loved each other and how great things were? You'll get me a job at court, right?" And Catherine, being kind hearted, actually gets him that job at court. Catherine was famed for being kind hearted. She actually got Henry to grant mercy to several different prisoners, and she was incredibly kind to Princess Elizabeth, the future Queen Elizabeth I. So, Durham coming to court was the beginning of the end. Because remember all those fun rumors that had been going around back when she was still living with her step grandmother? Yeah, now those rumors find their way to Henry. Not good, especially because they called each other husband and wife. At that time, if there had been any kind of marriage contract between them, even if they weren't officially married, in legal terms, it was considered bigamy. Very not good, even though she hadn't even met Henry then. Meanwhile, Culpepper keeps writing to Catherine saying how much that, he loves her and he keeps giving her unwanted attention.
And there's nothing more to it. He just cares so much, he's devoted. He says we have a connection.
Remember I said I'd have a lot more to say about Lady Ruckford? Well, that was her title. Her actual name was Jane Boleyn. You might be saying, Boleyn? Now that name sounds familiar. And remember that Anne Boleyn was accused of bigamy with her brother George. Jane Boleyn was George Boleyn's wife. And when Anne Boleyn was accused of sleeping around on Henry, she couldn't wait to get in the game and say, oh yeah, man, she's been even sleeping with my husband who's her own brother. Isn't that sick? Or behead her, your majesty. So, yeah, now there's rumors going around because people know that Catherine had been with Durham. And again, Jane Boleyn, Lady Ruckford, can't wait to say, oh yeah, I helped arrange secret meetings between her and Culpepper. She's definitely seen other guys behind your back, your majesty. Doesn't work out so well for her, because she just admitted to arranging the secret meetings. So, she just signed her own death warrant too, not just Catherine's. But there was no helping Catherine anymore. Even Culpepper, when he was questioned, said, yeah, we didn't actually do anything, but I wanted to. Yeah, Mr. Bright Boy there. Culpepper may or may not have been guilty of even worse crimes earlier. Here's another dark twist. It's recorded that there was a Thomas Culpepper who was guilty of forcing himself on a woman and then made sure that her husband wasn't exactly around to complain about it anymore. Now, the reason I say this might have been that Thomas Culpepper is because the Thomas Culpepper who was involved with Catherine had an older brother, whose also creative parents also named him Thomas. So, which Thomas was guilty of the earlier crimes? We don't honestly know for certain. Anyway, this Thomas was obviously not a good guy either, whether or not he was the one who committed the earlier crimes. And I'm sure Catherine was absolutely heartbroken to learn that he betrayed her that way.
This time was different. Why did I think he'd be different? But it's never, ever different.
I can only imagine her feeling of betrayal. Now, I misspoke before when I said that Anne Boleyn was accused of bigamy with her brother George. I meant to say incest. I misspoke myself, sorry. But now, here's another interesting connection. Catherine Howard was actually a first cousin to Anne Boleyn. And tragically met the same end, of course, once Henry heard about her involvement with other men. She, Catherine didn't even get a trial. She was found guilty by an order of Parliament. Now imagine if somebody arrested today didn't receive a trial, but Congress said you're guilty of a crime and you're going to be executed for that. That's exactly what happened to Catherine, not even a trial. First off, she was arrested, basically put under house arrest at Hampton Court Palace. Here's a chilling story that echoes down to this day. She broke free from her guards and ran to a chapel in the palace where Henry was behind closed doors saying prayers. Either she never made it all the way, or she did and she knocked and Henry ignored her. There's different versions of the story, and I don't know which is true, but anyway, the result was the same, that Henry never gave her the mercy that she hoped to beg for. And they say that the gallery where she ran down, her ghost is still seen there today, running, trying to get one last chance at mercy. But now, after that, after she'd ran trying to beg him for mercy, she realized it's over. She was taken to the tower to await her final day, and on her last night, she actually had the board where she would lay her head brought to her room so she could practice, so that she could have a dignified end. Supposedly, her last words were, "I die a queen, but I would rather have died the wife of Culpepper." This is a story that started long after she was gone and is not actually true. Her last words were basically saying, "I'm guilty, may my soul be forgiven." Now, why would she do that? Because if you didn't basically admit you were guilty, and oh yeah, the king's a great guy, even though he's about to have me executed, if you didn't say something to that general effect, your family paid the price. And so that's how Catherine Howard met her end. And I give her a lot of credit, even though, I think that the image of her asking to have that board brought to her at the end, that's absolutely chilling. And it was the end of an extremely tragic life. Now, I don't mean to make this video into a public service announcement, but before I close this, I just want to say that, these days we talk about the Me Too movement because so many women, there are estimates of as many as 1 in 3 go through this kind of thing, that they're sexually abused. And that's how many we know about, how many never do come forward. And this can happen to anyone. It happened to a Queen of England. And it is never okay to blame the victim the way Catherine was blamed by her grandmother. And it is never okay to say, well, the person was in a position of power over them, so that gives them that right. It's never okay to say, what were they wearing? Did they ask for it? Were they in a place they shouldn't have been? No. A victim of this kind of thing is the victim. And the women going through this today deserve much better, the same way Catherine Howard did. And I hope that the day comes when women aren't treated with doubt when they come forward and say, yes, this happened to me, and that they aren't blamed for it the way that Catherine was. Think of how her reputation has been tarnished over time. She's gone from, you know, before I saw this musical, before I heard the songs from it rather, I thought she was a completely different person than what she was. Because that's the way history painted her. And I do hope that more people learn the truth about what her life really was like. This is someone who suffered from the age of 13. And I hope that the truth of her story becomes much better known. I'll see you in the next video where I will be talking about the last wife of Henry VIII, Catherine Parr. And I hope you all take care until then.